afternoon, listeners. This is David Wright, and I'm your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And this afternoon, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Eric Sidle. Eric, how are you?
Hey, David, how are you doing? I'm doing great today. How about you?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Thanks for being on. So,
No
uh,
problem.
tell our listeners a little bit about your current role. Where are you right now?
So, hey, everybody. So I am the Chief Technology Officer at ChargePoint, which is the largest EV charging network in North America and one of the fastest growing in Europe, which is really exciting. It's one of the most exciting industries right now because there's so many things that we'll go into. Under my purview in the company is all aspects of engineering, including mechanical, product design, reliability and test, high power and high speed EE design, firmware, embedded, mobile applications, front end development, and all aspects of cloud services and data. And that's across North America and Europe. We also have business and IT applications under our purview as well.
Super cool. Well, I'm really excited to have you on. Really interested in diving deeper into your vision for ChargePoint, some of the cool stuff you guys are working on. But before we get into that, first off, we like to start with what's one piece of actionable advice you'll look to give our listeners today?
So it might be a little cliche, but I'm going to say it. Be in a role or a job that you absolutely love. Wake up every day and think, I want to improve and change the world for the better, and I want to do something and I want to make a difference. Constantly put points in the board with that kind of mindset and action and deliverable every day. Again, maybe that sounds cliche, but I genuinely, inherently believe in that.
No, I totally agree. I'm fortunate enough to be in a role that,
Yeah, I can see that.
most days I feel the same way. So and I'm so grateful for that. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, exactly. You're making a huge difference in what you're doing here. It's the same thing. So it's great. And it's probably why you're so happy doing it.
Amen. So Eric, I want to talk a little bit about how you got to be the chief technology officer of this global organization. Where did you start out? And tell us a little bit about kind of your history as a professional.
Yeah, I'll go back a little bit further from the professional aspects and go into a little bit of the personal because it really affected my professional career. I was really fortunate enough that when I was young, I grew up in Europe. So I spent 4 to 5 years in Europe. I got to attend the International School of Brussels. And the reason I bring that up is because it really affected me as far as culture and understanding people and cultures from around the world. And as such, I've traveled to like 46 countries now, total,
Wow.
both for work and personal. I think that makes a big difference. So I'm very fortunate and blessed from that aspect. Started out the career, I guess, in technology way back. I'm sort of dating myself, but back in the Atari 800 computer days. Do you remember the Atari 800? Is that before your time?
Well, I remember it for sure, slightly, but
Writing in Atari Basic. For those who know Atari, like the manual alone was like sort of read like kids because they didn't know how to write manuals for, professional programmers because there wasn't too many back then, but really good stuff. That's where I really got started. Was a real nerdy kid, playing games and computers, like, the social awkward kid. Went to University of Illinois, studied psychology, philosophy, and sociology because I was so socially awkward. One of the reasons I bring that up is how much that's paid it forward in my career. So one really piece of advice I would give people, if you're starting out in college and you're in engineering, don't hesitate to study on the personal side of things. Cause that's been enormous for me, is understanding that stuff. And I was just trying to cure my social awkwardness at the time, not realizing what it was going to do for me. So from there, jumped into Compaq Computers back in the day when Compaq was around. So I interned at Compaq and I was a co-op at AMD. It's another piece of advice. Go ahead.
That was one of my first devices was like the like original or almost original like Compaq Presarios. That's what I really like cut my teeth on when I was younger.
Those were so fantastic, weren't they? I mean, it was such an amazing
Yeah.
company because they were so ahead of their time with the portable box. I mean, it looked like a big suitcase at the time, because things were were not where we are today. But it had the little fold down. I mean, it was amazing. So I got to work on those as an intern in college. And that's another piece of advice I would give for kids who are in college. Don't worry about delaying your graduation. Internships and co-ops and being able to work on stuff like that and put that on your CV and your resume early on is wonderful. Compaq was an amazing company, super aggressive.
Very cool. I also
Yeah.
appreciated what you had to say about kind of being or what I heard was being a student of the world, being, I didn't realize, I'm thinking of this trip I had to, and I've been there a couple of times now, but to Montreal, which is only, 6 hours north, but like, just like being in Montreal and being in that, different country in Canada, but it's so close and you don't even realize how different the culture is. You know what I mean? So I can only
That's right.
imagine being that well traveled, and it just opens
right.
your eyes to like the world, and then kind of for me like the universe, like just solidifying like I don't know what I don't know, right?
Yeah, I went up there right to your point. I went up there with a good friend of mine from high school. We were just touring the Northeast and we toured up through Canada. And when he saw the signs in French, which of course, having grown up partially in Belgium, it was no big deal. But you start seeing road signs in French and everything's in French, and it's like it's a culture shock for people sometimes because if you never experienced it, and just that, and you multiply that times so many countries and cultures around the world, it's great stuff, right? It really
Very
opens your
cool.
mind.
Sorry,
Yeah. So
I digress.
no. That's a great tangent subject. So yeah, from there, I just started oscillating between. I just have this addiction, this adrenaline. As you can tell, I'm kind of an extroverted, high energy person, and was always into adrenaline. Bit of adrenaline junkie, right? Whether it was mountain biking or racing on jet skis or something on a lake. And so I've oscillated between the impact that really big companies like Compaq or Apple can do. So I've oscillated my career between that and startup companies and the mad, crazy rush of success or failure in startup companies. So I've oscillated between, and again, super fortunate in my career. I've done everything from large, almost supercomputing type computing at Hewlett Packard, military laptops, and down to small scale stuff, as well as autonomous driving and everything else, and then MacBook Pros and stuff for Apple. So one thing that people don't, if you look through my LinkedIn, which is nowhere near as detailed as it probably should be, is that I didn't actually get into management until I was about 38. It was while I was at Apple. I intentionally stayed in the mud doing system design and project management and program management and every aspect I could get my hands on. And it sort of ties back to that time in college with the sociology and psychology and everything. I spent a lot of time studying like military books, and never forgot all the stories about all the grunts and the people on the ground and how much they hate when management comes in, and the people who, never really did it, never got their hands dirty, never got their hands in the mud for a really long time. And I just always told myself I'd never be that person. So yeah, didn't even get into management until about just over a decade ago. And it's taken off from there. It's been a wild ride between Apple and then Neo on autonomous driving, and now more than 4 years now at ChargePoint. It's been a crazy.
I was
ride.
actually a sociology major as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, sociology and econ. So I didn't even.
How did you convert from that to technology?
I mean, it's a interesting journey, but I started out like as a kid. I was building computers and setting up compact local area networks and studying MCSE by the time I was in high school. But by the time I was ready to go to college and I wanted to move to New York, it was like, well, sociology was my passion because I was passionate about people. I did want to help people, but then like the young, dumb part of me was like, I want to move to New York and make money and be a big shot. So like that was like the economics, and I got into finance for a few years and hated it. And then, I had an opportunity come up in IT and jumped on it. And then the rest.
And now you've merged the two, right? Because that's kind of what you're doing here, which is
100%.
And some of the best advice I could give, technologists, whether you're a software developer, hardware developer, whatever kind of technologist you are, it's just amazing. I was fortunate enough to take both exec training as well as the management training at Apple. Apple has Apple University, the famous Apple University. Amazing classes, absolutely amazing. And you could tell one of them was they get an actor who's like a challenged employee, and you don't know whether it's the employee's fault. You don't know anything. And they sit him down, and it's a phenomenal actor. It's somebody like you really think they're super challenged and they have these problems, and they throw different problems at you. You sit in a circle, and you the different people try to talk to the employee, and you could really tell the people who understood human connection and psychology, like the engineering managers who are being trained, like who has that sort of empathetic link, or like, how does this person going to respond if I say this, this, and this, versus the ones who are just, I'm a software engineer, become a manager. I'm a technical nerd, like I know resistors, and now I got to talk to human beings. The ones who didn't have that sociology link. And I think it's so important.
Yeah. I was asked a question like for an interview about what makes a good leader. And I asked one of my VP of operations, I was like, well, what do you think makes a good leader? Like, do you think I'm a good leader? And he like cracked a joke at first, but then he's like, yeah, no, but you're in the trenches with us. And, as a CEO and as a CTO, like you need to walk that line where I'm not in the trenches too much, right? Like where
right.
I'm losing sight of the greater vision. But at the same time, like you said, it's all about that empathy and that understanding, because I need to touch, move, and inspire people to follow me, not manage people, right? That's my experience.
No, I think that's great, and we can talk about it further later. But yeah, there's people ask me. I always say the difference between leadership and management is leadership is, do people want to follow you? If they don't want to follow you, you're not a leader.
Exactly. So we've already talked a little bit about this, Eric. But if you had to, isolate one of the most important things that you've learned over the course of your life, either personally or professionally, what would that be? And what was life like before learning it and after learning it?
I would say, again, I'm a bit of a kind of a high energy person. So I don't know if this more applies to my style of personality than others, but settle in and be still more often than you realize is necessary. Let me give a good example about that. I was at HP, if you include the compact years, HP 6 years, and just had that itch. You get that, like, I gotta go. Like, it's a big behemoth company. There's a lot of process. It's a lot slower, obviously, than a startup. It was definitely more process and a bit slower, more methodical than compact was, because compact was very, go-getter and faster. And so I had the itch to leave and to join another startup and take my hand out of the big company and back into the small companies. And at the time, I interviewed for silicon design, and I was doing system engineering, some coding, and system design. And the silicon design team offered me a job to come design silicon. And that never happens, right? It's really rare that you go from upper level on the stack down into silicon design. And that itch and that restlessness or whatever, no, I'm going to get out of the big company. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made, to have gotten that deep understanding. And I got some of it at Apple, working with the silicon team, but nowhere near like actually designing and doing actual design and development. So the big thing I would say is you don't always have to jump. You don't always have to just take a bigger picture view and pause. And I think that lesson for me was valuable, and it's still valuable today, because you get stuck in the grind. We'll talk about how many things ChargePoint's doing. It's an absolutely amazing company. You get stuck in the grind and you forget to just pause for a second, break out a notebook, break out a notepad, and just write down the things you want to be doing, and write down the things and just pause for a second, whether it's mindful meditation or whatever you want to call it. I would say that's one of the biggest lessons learned that I wish I had known earlier a little bit better, was learning to pause and think through
Yeah, I agree. I'm a huge proponent of meditation. It's something that like I personally shouldn't leave the house unless I've meditated because I'm super analytical. I'm also, go-getter type A.
That's right.
And sometimes I have to realize that like you're saying, I need to like take a step back, and sometimes not doing anything is the best decision,
That's right.
especially in moments where things are happening and I feel like I don't have as much control as I'd like, right? and
That's right.
there and I need to, in those moments, sometimes make a choice to just not email that person or not make that call, and just sit in it for a second. um
Yeah, and we've all had those moments. You get that email, your blood pressure goes up, your heart starts pounding a little bit, you're agitated, you're like, seriously? And you start typing you type the answer and then hit save, put it in drafts, walk away.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. I love that. How
Yeah.
about
We've all been there. We've all been there,
hell
that's
yeah.
for sure.
um
So, but yeah,
how
I
about
just and especially if you're juggling so many different things, just pausing in your head and just sit down for a second, physically write it out. Don't use a computer, and just physically write things down and take note. This is what I want to do today. This is what I want to accomplish. And
yeah,
the peace and calmness of that you bring to, and you start to feel those successes. Okay, I succeeded at this one. You go in the next day and you're like, check, 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 check. Okay, I didn't do these two. Let's move those over to the next day. It's good stuff. So wish I'd have known that. I wish I
another
would have been expert at that earlier.
another thing that you reminded me of that I picked up from another executive leader that I really respect is having kind of an advisory board, personally and professionally around me. So I have a business coach, but then I also have just trusted friends and other executives that I trust. And when I need to make a decision, particularly a big decision, them holding up a mirror and being like, "Whoa, no, that is not what you want to do." Like, let's take a step back, and
Yeah.
that is extremely valuable as well, I would say.
I couldn't agree with you more. Another thing about my career, probably one of the reasons why I'm the luckiest or most blessed person, is the mentors that I've had. And I can name every single one of them going back, even in the college days, in the interns and co-ops. I've been so blessed with the great mentors. Actually, the guy who told me sit still, be calm, and if his advice was, if a company wants you or another department inside the company wants you, they're still, if you're good, they're still going to want you a year from now. So don't feel like you need to rush into opportunities. His name was Edward Frank. He was the corporate VP of Broadcom, VP of Systems Engineering in Apple. Same kind of advice. And yeah, that like you said, that hold up the mirror and here's what you're doing wrong, here's what you're doing right, here's what you're doing well and not, here's where you like, that is the best thing you can get. And that's part of that slow down, right? Slow down and think through it.
100%. How about, Eric, a failure that you experienced over the course of your career, um, and one that sticks out in your mind as something that you learned a lot from?
I usually answer this question a little bit higher level because it's been a series of failures over and over and over again. And I sort of bucketize it into not understanding architecture and the architecture flow very well. Whether it was, laptops, or whether it's, supercomputers, or whether it's web development that I've done or writing code, not understanding the architecture, the end to end. And we'll talk about how great ChargePoint is at this, but not understanding the total end-to-end story. A lot of people sort of rush into a design and then they realize 2/3 of the way through they're starting to fail. You run tests or whatever you're doing. You find out later that, you slow down to speed up on the architectural and really understanding how the end-to-end of the user experience and every aspect of how this hardware, software fit together, especially when it comes to manufacturing. Some of the greatest designs in the world that can't be built repeatedly or easily or tested in a factory aren't very good designs, right? Like you can't make money off of them. And that's a part of the architecture. So I would say I'm going to kind of bucketize the failures, in the first 10 or 15 years of my career around not properly thinking through or architecting things as well as I probably could have. One of the best mentors that I've had is a guy named Steve Sfarzo. He's probably going to be mad at me for mentioning his name, but he's one of the head architects at Apple. He's been there, geez, like 25, 30 years. Amazing guy. And he really teaches everybody who comes anywhere near him really how to architect and how to think and dig down and like think through all the pieces and how all the puzzle pieces fit together. So I would say my bigger failures have been not understanding the holistic view and the architecture properly, and then ending up 2/3 of the way through a program and needing to start over or needing to make huge changes, which causes big delays.
Great advice. Makes me think of the Phoenix project. More, I guess, more DevOps related than manufacturing, but a lot of those concepts.
It's the same concept, though. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of books, because I want to get into your current role a little bit more and what you guys are up to at ChargePoint. But before that, favorite book, either that you're reading right now or all time?
This one's such a hard question because there's so many good ones, right? Who Moved My Cheese, Blitzscaling, Swim with the Sharks, et cetera, et cetera. I would say, since we touched on psychology, the one, because it's short, sweet, and has a huge impact, is on a personality front. I would say The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is probably one of my favorite. And on the technology and business standpoint, again, maybe a little cliche, but Only the Paranoid Survive by Andrew Grove, because just the concept of hitting the curve and the inflection point and not being paranoid enough to know how to recover is so critical. That message is so super critical to so many companies like BlackBerry, and so many examples where they just weren't paranoid, right? They got comfortable.
Right. I love that. I actually I've heard a few people have recommended that book, and I haven't read it yet, so I'm gonna have to add that to my book list there. So Eric, let's dive into your current role. So you're the Chief Technology Officer at ChargePoint. Tell us a little bit about your vision for the organization as it stands.
Vision for the organization and vision for the company as a whole is to work tirelessly to change the world of electrification and fueling of cleaner transportation of people and goods and vehicles around the globe. Now that's a very high level statement, but it's absolutely true. And it's what all ChargePointers bleeding orange are doing every single day, and what we care about. And we do it in such a way that's a very user mindset, in the total end-to-end experience that makes it enjoyable, whether you're a fleet driver, whether you're a standard driver inside coming out of your garage. Instead of an arduous ecosystem, you want a comfortable system as we transition from liquid fuels over to electric and electrification. You want that experience to be good and holistic, and an end-to-end experience as it crosses the different verticals. So that's the big goal of ChargePoint, and it's doing extremely well in that area across the different verticals. We can talk about that in a bit. As far as vision for my specific organization, as far as technology and engineering, we have created and are continuing to push and create a worldwide matrixed organization that empowers a broad array of cutting edge innovative technologies that service, again, the highly and rapid scaling demands of a market that's new, that's growing, game changing, and culture changing. It's literally changing the world as right in front of our eyes. So being able to create an adaptive, matrixed, worldwide organization of technology experts that are capable of meeting that tough challenge. But along with that, I think vision for the technology organization is that it still has to feel like a family. I genuinely believe that you should leave your family from home for your family at work. You should argue like brothers and sisters. It shouldn't be highly political. And you work together in the common goal together. To create this new infrastructure and this new culture. So genuinely, firmly believe in that as well for the organization.
It's crazy to think, because I have another software startup in a similar kind of arena where it's like kind of a game changer, and it's interesting to think as you guys are just dealing with the supply and demand of this burgeoning kind of field and setting prices. I mean, there's so much to it. I imagine, I just have a lot of respect for what you guys are building on multiple different levels, but I imagine it's just like a Rubik's cube of, fun challenges, right? Like not like, challenges that can't be overcome, but just, I, again, just have a lot of respect for what I imagine your organization is up to.
It is. I often call it solving a 4-dimensional Rubik's cube. I like saying that a lot. So it's ironic that you're calling it that way because I use that term frequently.
Well, and in that vein,
let's for the listeners, no, this was not planned, and no, we didn't have this discussion. It's just we just keep agreeing on this stuff.
It's true. I love it. So Eric, let's talk a little bit about some of the key initiatives that you guys are focused on.
Yeah. So to give a little bit of background and history for the listeners, that what's really important and one of the most powerful things about ChargePoint is that it thinks in decades. It was, for those who don't know, it was founded in 2007. If you think back to 2007, there wasn't any electric vehicles on the road, right? So here's a company creating and thinking through the electrification infrastructure and how to advance that when there was hardly any electric cars on the road at all, right? So that's a very visionary perspective. And so ChargePoint likes to think in those kinds of decades. Today, EVs represent, I think it's around 13% of new car sales. In 2 to 3 years, it's estimated that'll be 30% of new car sales will be electric vehicles. In 2040, it's hypothesized it's going to be around 70 to 80% of all vehicles will be electric in new car sales. So scaling to that kind of growth is paramount to be able to go into a bunch of different verticals. So what ChargePoint is focused on is being able to conveniently, and that's a key word, conveniently situate the technology of electrification to where the drivers are at, whether it's at home, whether it's work, whether it's around town or on the road. When you think about fueling from a liquid fueling standpoint, the legacy gas, the gas stations are somewhere between point A and point B. That's what most people are used to. But if electrification, it rips all that up and it turns it around. You still have mid-path, but the majority of charging stations, when you think about it, are going to be in the destinations. If you go to a convenience or a store, drivers at home in their garages, residential and multifamily, like a fleet, school buses, transportation, public transportation, it's at the actual depots, not mid-route, right? You don't want them to have to stop mid-route to fuel up typically. So there's a lot. So it pushes out to the ends of the wheel instead of just, mid-route. Last mile delivery vehicles, fueling and convenience, parking, retail, I could go on and on and on about the different verticals. And so we're developing an end-to-end ecosystem of technology of hardware and software that encompasses all that for a maximized user experience and comfortability.
When I think about going to a store, like oftentimes I don't see a charging station at, Walmart yet, but I imagine like, right. Like that's, so I imagine you guys are probably attacking those places, and it's cool to think about. It's just it's very cool to think about. And I imagine
sorry,
go ahead, please. No.
Well, let's take your example of in your house, you have your charger in your garage and you have that tied and you want that to charge your vehicle. Sometimes you want it to charge it immediately, like rapid charge or instant charging. And sometimes, most of the time, you're not going to want to charge that during high rate times. So you want the software of the vendor to be able to be tied into the utility and know the utility rates so that your car is charging when it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour instead of 50 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So there's optimized charging. And then if you get solar, you get battery storage, you want it to be able to interface that with that, that's your home. You get in the car, you got wearables, right? You got your mobile app, you have your in-dash software. ChargePoint's involved in all of that. So whether you're wanting to do route planning or you want to say, hey, I'm going to go to this Target or this Target. Oh, look, this Target has chargers. You can see it in your in-dash in your car. ChargePoint's involved in software development of that entire ecosystem, including like deep links and deep connections, whether it's iOS, Apple Maps, or Google Maps. So you get on the road and you get to, say, Target. You want to be able to plug in. Maybe you want those stations. If there's not enough stations, maybe there's a wait list. You're going to be there for half an hour, so you want to get on the wait list. You want it to notify you, hey, your vehicle's done. Can you please move? Or you want to, somebody's just moved and hey, your turn's up. Say you're wandering, you go into a movie and you're going to be there a couple hours. You want that software infrastructure, whether it's cloud services or, notification on the mobile, you want to be able to have it be fully interactive, right? And so ChargePoint encompasses through all of that. And I haven't even touched on all the fleet and all the enterprise class. So
it's super cool. And I mean, as the government, mandates organizations to start investing in more stuff like this, I imagine it lends itself to, to your guys' mission too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and that was just going to, say, a shopping mall or something. Let's say you're going to work. A lot of places at work, there's more and more electric vehicles getting into the workplace. And if there's not enough chargers, that wait list application or other application services that we provide, the notification services of, okay, the station's up, you're allowed to move, or, hey, your vehicle's not charging anymore. Can you please move your vehicle so other people can come in? But at the workplace, there's a lot of ecosystem that even the workplace wants, right? The workplaces they want to be able to maybe give free electricity or free energy to their employees. But if customers or other people are coming by, it's not free. So they want to be able to have an advanced payment system. And they want to be able to configure their chargers for who can use them, when they can be used, who gets charged what. And you can set up those connections and those rate cases. So even in the workplace environment, there's so many technology nuances that go into it. And we haven't even touched on the hardware yet. So
that's very cool. So in regard to let's say like a gas station that has, classic fuel, and this is my ignorance, but what is the gas station's benefit to installing those electric chargers? They can make the customer pay for the charge, or
that's correct.
Okay, got it.
One of our good partners, you got 7-Eleven, and there's a host of companies. Like we just had a big announcement with Starbucks. Whether it's a gas station mentality of in the route, you put a fast charger, DC fast charge in there, which delivers energy much more quickly or much more efficiently over than AC does. So the incentive that they have is that, yes, they can charge for energy, right? So that's one. But two, you see companies all around the world rethinking how fueling happens as far as like the typical gas station type mentality. And so they'll put a store there, or they'll put a coffee shop there, or they'll put something else. So for the 10 minutes or 20 minutes there that your vehicle might be there because you're en route from city to city or wherever, they provide a convenience and they provide other services for you while you're doing that.
Right. That makes sense. Very cool. What are some of the biggest challenges you'd say, Eric, that you guys are facing, along the way here?
I'd say, and challenge is the right word. It's not a problem. It's a challenge. It's a first world problem, is a huge success. Like the market is scaling at an incredible rate. ChargePoint has been successful at an absolutely incredible rate. And it's keeping up with the market demands. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is when you have a very new market like this, you have a lot of customers, vendors, and different companies who interface with that market. As the market is growing and scaling, if it's not a market that's been around before like this, there's a lot of different ideas about how that market should be shaped. Companies that come in and don't have experience in that market, and they create these demands that aren't necessarily advantageous with the right approach, right? It's in their best interest, but not the best interest of the ecosystem, of the whole, of the actual customers, the drivers who are going around, and the people who are needing to fuel their vehicle. So that's one of the biggest challenges, and it means heavily getting involved in standards organizations and creating consortiums and being able to reduce the noise and focus on what the big goals are and stay focused. And again, you go back to the good books like about hyperscaling. It's always a challenge, and it's always the adding too many features and being able to work on new features and new products every single year versus making sure the quality and the security and the privacy is all in place. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because it's in line with what I was thinking about before. And at a more micro level versus what you guys are experiencing too. But like, now that we've reached a level of sustainability, we have a choice whether or not we want to, accommodate those requests of certain, I imagine potential customers or vendors, right? Where, we may need to choose people versus profit, right? Or
That's right.
The underlying end user or customer versus the conglomerate, or things of that nature. So very interesting.
Yeah, and one of the big, and you hear about it all the time in the news, and you've covered it quite a bit, is security, right? Security, privacy, quality obviously is absolutely paramount. You think about the examples we give, and I can give a lot more examples of access control and flexible pricing. You're moving funds around, payments and transfers, fuel cards like WEX and Voyager. You have GDPR aspects that you have to take into account as far as privacy, what data can move across the Atlantic from EU to North America and what can't. In Canada to North America, SOX compliance, PCI compliance, the privacy and the security aspects of the personal data and the transfer of those funds is absolutely key. So it's always a challenge, because you can't take your foot off the accelerator of innovating in those ways and keeping the rest, and trying to keep the rest of the industry, because you have cloud to cloud security. So if you're interfacing with other cloud services, you got to make sure they're as secure and protect, right? Because the attacks can come from anywhere.
Speaking of innovative technologies, are you guys leveraging, blockchain, LoRaWAN right now, or what are some of the most innovative things you guys are excited about right now?
We are not. We've talked frequently about using blockchain technology specifically for, a plug and charge type situation. You just plug in, and the vehicle to station, pass certs, and do the PKI certificate situation, and then also the station to cloud. So we've talked about it. We haven't started moving in that direction, just because there isn't a need for that just yet. Because your standard PKI practices are able to be secure enough right now, which is great. But other technologies, as far as innovation goes, one of my favorite things when new employees show up at ChargePoint, they say, "I thought it was just a charger. I thought it was just like this hardware piece. I thought it was just a charger. I can't believe everything that's going on here." I like to tell new people who are joining ChargePoint that the only thing we don't have is aerospace, because we're involved in just about every other aspect of the technology stack, which is really exciting. Right? It's like, let me give you some examples. We design all our own hardware, and that includes mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and everything else. So that's a cell phone in there. Basically, what's sitting inside the charger is a standard cell phone, right? It's got wireless, it's got Bluetooth, it's got RFID processor, NAND, memory, and everything else. It's just bigger and a little bit more rugged, right? It's got to work at -40. It's got touch screen and gesture. It's got everything else. And then you have your high power electronics behind there. And with ChargePoint, we're always trying to push the cutting edge technology, whether it's AC or DC. It's all about efficiency. We try to be number one on efficiency and accuracy and metering, because if you're charging at home, you don't want to be, when you get the bill for 50 kilowatt hours that you've consumed, you don't want to know that 5% of that was wasted into thermals because you have an inefficient device, or that your metering is way off. We believe in really tight accuracy and delivery of that, of the energy from the grid over to your vehicle. We're also getting on the DC technology side into next generation higher frequency technology like silicon carbide, as well as some others I won't talk about. Because if you think about it from fleet services and how fleet managers want to bring their buses in or their trucks in It always has to have high uptime. So you have to have redundancy architected and designed in, et cetera. So from a firmware real-time operating system or from a Linux stack perspective, even just the chargers, when you think about the hardware that goes in the ground, the technology and the innovation that's going into that is absolutely amazing. And it's really cutting edge. Yeah, and that's just the charger. I haven't even gotten into the software services in the cloud yet.
Well, right. And what my mind goes to, as it often does, is the value of the data that you guys are mining. You know, it sounds like the company is largely like built in the cloud. And then even from an anonymized standpoint, being able to tell, like with all the geo tracing that you're doing, like where these electrical vehicles are going, what they're doing, they're trending. I mean, it must be super valuable.
Yeah, we could spend a whole podcast on that alone, but just from a high level standpoint, we acquired a highly successful company called City out of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and they were doing, you know, everything from battery management, OEM, like vehicle telematics, you know, operations, route planning, and everything else. So you have all that data. We have all the data from the chargers, whether it's diagnostics and analysis of, you know, health monitoring of the charger, or who's plugging in and when they're plugging in and how often they're plugging in, how much energy is dispensed, or the financials. It's a lot of it can be a lot of unfragmented data that goes into a system. And the key for data, as everybody knows, is about doing the benchmarking and the querying of that data, because when you can compile all that data, then you, in a highly optimized fashion, then the success rate of your company as it scales goes extremely up. And so customers want access to some of that data. We can't give obviously all of it because we have to do privacy protection and everybody can't have access to it, but the external and internal analytics of that data, and it means moving to, while yes, we're still using like AWS and data lake technology on the back end, you also have to go into like a lake house, which is more innovative and allows you to do that analytics and optimize that data, and defragment it so that you can do that analysis really fast. So whether you're doing machine learning or just benchmarking analysis on that data for fleet customers or enterprise class customers, it's absolutely it's absolutely key.
Yeah, super key. That's awesome. Really cool. So got a few more questions for you, Eric. One just before we get off kind of what you guys are up to at ChargePoint. What are some of the best practices that you and your team follow, either from a leadership standpoint or a technology standpoint?
Well, like I alluded to before, I would say the number one thing is to get rid of bureaucracy and politics in an organization. I've seen so many companies or organizations fail due to infighting. So you have to be efficient. You have to have an environment where people feel comfortable about calling out issues that they're having in retrospectives. And here's where we screwed up. It is what it is. Here's where we did it wrong. Here's what we're going to learn from, and here's how we're going to do it better next time. I think empowering that, and it's extremely easy to say, and it's not always easy to put in practice. So it's a constant effort of getting rid of politics in your organization, because as you scale really, really fast, and as you're hiring at an incredible rate like ChargePoint, it's not always easy to keep that culture going, that startup like friendly, everybody's together, especially in the post-COVID times where you can't get together and go have lunch together always, because people are spread out really far. So that's one. Pushing the innovation standpoint. A players want to work on tough problems. And so you always have to, whether it's cloud services moving, you're moving your cloud services over to next generation, right? And from monolithic, moving over. So you can choose the technology based on, getting off PHP, going over to Golang or Python or whatever it is. When you're going to microservices, if you can provide that roadmap of technology innovation, it attracts more A players, because smart, go-getting type people want to work on tough problems. And again, to repeat it a little bit, the most amazing thing about ChargePoint is you can be a cloud services person that learns about injection molding plastics at ChargePoint and vice versa, because we're a tight family. And if you really want to, you can learn so many different levels of technology. So I think that's key. Because we're a worldwide organization, we have offices in, I think it's 9 countries now, staying in touch and communicating really well, again, which kind of goes back to the politics a little bit, not creating silos and fiefdoms, but I think that's absolutely paramount in today's international culture of work and business.
100%. And I mean, it's great that you bring up the, working through politics and bureaucracy and stuff like that. For a company that's innovating as quick as you guys are, it's just a necessity. One of the biggest things that we're encountering with organizations that have been around a while, particularly with the classic late adopters, is that we're needing to go back and unwind a lot of that, because it's one of the biggest enemies to innovation, right? Is that just institutionalized bureaucracy?
Because that's how we've done it for a long time. Okay.
Right.
So let's scrap it and redo it, because it doesn't sound like it's And what, especially with rapidly scaling companies, what worked 3 years ago in ChargePoint possibly could have worked really, really well. But that doesn't mean 3 years later it's going to work exceptionally well, because our scale and our growth is so incredible. And you have to have that constant mindset. When we acquired both Has to Be, which is a software company out of Austria, as well as Vera City, one of the key things was, we're not going to care whose technology stack was better. We're going to put the pieces together or come up with a whole new roadmap. It's not going to be about, I need to protect my baby. It's going to be about, what's the right thing to do for the company. And I got to give huge credit to the team worldwide. We got 3 incredible companies together, and we've really focused on what technology, where do we want to go, instead of, like what worked in the past, but where do you really want to go? So you take pieces of success out of the different companies and you put together, again, that 4-dimensional Rubik's Cube on the cloud services on the next generation that we want to work on. And that excites people, right? Because you get A players together and everyone knows when you're designing something, how good it is. Everybody knows. And if you give them that exciting roadmap for the future, that's based on innovation and doing the right thing for customers, everybody gets charged and everybody gets excited.
That is super cool. So we're running out of time here. So two last questions for you. One, where do you see the charging / energy efficiency, industry going in the future? What do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes in your industry?
If you listen to the analysts and you take an even conservative approach, the world is electrifying in its transportation, in its movement of people and goods. And so this is not going away. It's a very exciting time. You're going to start seeing a little more consolidation, as we've had on some of the standards. Like there's, standards on whether it's the connector or the communication between the station and the cloud, or the cloud to cloud, working on standardization a little bit better there. And the people who can innovate the fastest and the people who can innovate with the best quality. And I think the last one is user experience. Again, you walk in and you think it's just a charger. It's just, you take this cable and you plug it into the car, but the user experience is absolutely paramount. That's a big mistake that everybody made in so many different industries, and they got it wrong. Apple obviously was one of the key ones that got it right. Apple, Tesla, and so many others we can name. As an example, on the ChargePoint chargers, the force it takes to pull we don't like cables sitting on the ground. We fight against that every chance we get. So cable management is key in the mechanical team. And so, because if you drive over a cable, it creates a safety risk, right? And so the force it takes to pull that cable in from the cable management and the bendability of the cables, like the fine little details and how you interface with the mobile app and how you interface with the wearables, car, as well as the web and the front end and the back end services. That end-to-end user experience is going to more and more play into the effect of who wins and who doesn't in this space.
Great. I love that. That's so cool. And it's so cool that you guys manage or can manage that end to end, right? Like with the hardware, with the
Trying.
software. Very, very cool. So Eric, but as we wrap up here, we like to ask our guests if you could go back 5, 10, even 15 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would say that the idea of broadening your scope, like I've designed websites, I've designed hardware, I've wrote code, C code back when I was at Advanced Micro Devices. Like the broad system engineering that I did was super effective. So stick on that. But I'd go back to the lessons learned statement that we talked about, is learn how to be still a little bit more often. That would be one point. The other point is know yourself a little bit better. Really, we talked about the Gaussian curve of personalities and types of people out there. Obviously, I'm more of an extroverted, high energy type person. You rub elbows at times with people, and understanding that and understanding who you are versus other people and what they bring to the table and value add. I think I would teach myself a little bit more about that 10, 20 years ago.
Great advice. Eric, it was such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for being here.
This was great. Thank you.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Disruptive Innovators podcast, and we'll catch you next week.